Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Jump into Enterprise Mobile Development with Xamarin. My name is Marisa Keller-Outen. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Syncfusion and your moderator for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Melamed, Product Solution Specialist here at Syncfusion. If you have any questions, you can enter them into the questions box on the right side of the screen at any time. We'll answer the questions at the end of the session and also post the entire Q&A on our blog. We are recording this webinar and will share the link in the next few days. All registrants will receive an email with the link. This and previous webinars will be available on our YouTube channel. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly tell you a bit about Syncfusion. Syncfusion delivers an extensive range of over 800 web, mobile, and desktop controls. We also empower businesses to get the most out of their data with our enterprise solutions, including the dashboard and big data platforms. We've been in business for over 15 years and are headquartered in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina in the U.S. Syncfusion has more than 12,000 customers, including large financial institutions, Fortune 100 companies, and global IT consultancies. More than 900,000 users from 125 countries trust Syncfusion in their development process. Now that you know a bit more about us, I'll hand this over to Aaron to get started.
Alright, so today we're going to be starting off by looking at how you can download and install Syncfusion's Xamarin controls on your machine. We'll from there go into the actual main part of the demonstration or the webinar, which will be looking at the actual controls we offer in our Xamarin suite via the sample browser that we have for Android. Following that, we'll have a Q&A session as well as a short blurb about our licensing options. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about what we actually offer inside of our Xamarin suite. We have over 90 total controls for Xamarin, so that includes Xamarin Forms, Xamarin iOS, and Xamarin Android, all in one package. We have complete MVVM support for creating scalable and testable applications. We also continuously update our suite of controls with 4 major releases every year, in addition to monthly service packs. We also offer seamless integration with Visual Studio, including NuGet support and IntelliSense comments. So now let's move over to how to actually download or get access to our Xamarin controls. So what you're looking at now is the download section of the Syncfusion portal. So once you get access to Syncfusion's controls, whether you download it, you've obtained a license or a trial, you'll have access to this page. On the downloads page, you'll have this list of links, and they're sorted by the most recent release. So at the top, you'll always have the most recent release. So you just click on download links and details. And here at the very top, you have our Enterprise Edition binaries and samples download. This will give you access to all the controls offered by Syncfusion, including the binaries and examples for all of them. So that includes the Xamarin Forms, as well as all the source code for any samples that we have. You also can download our controls from separate libraries. So if you come down here and scroll down, you'll see that we also have a separate Xamarin download. So you can see we have one for both Windows as an exe, as well as one for Mac as a package. So we also do support Visual Studio Mac via this download option here. In addition, we also provide NuGet packages. So if you visit our help and documentation page, you'll find the instructions for how to configure NuGet packages inside of Visual Studio for Mac, as well as Visual Studio for Windows. Now, the application that we're going to be looking at today with our controls can be found on the Google Play Store as well as the Apple App Store. So here's the link, or here's the page for it on Google Play. All you need to do is search for Syncfusion, and then you can find the Syncfusion Controls Explorer. So I'm actually going to be demonstrating this application on an actual Android device. So this is the same exact application you'd be downloading from the Google Play Store. So first up is our selection of charts. We support over 20 different chart types on Xamarin Forms. And you can see here, as I tab through each of these, you'll see that they all support smooth animation. So I do recommend that you download these controls on your own devices so you can see exactly how smooth these animations actually are. So we include all the standard chart types that you'd expect to find, so bar, column, line, spline, bar, etc. We also have pie, donut, semi-pie, semi-donut, etc. In addition to your standard chart types, we also support technical indicators for the financial industry. So if you're displaying financial data such as stock information, you'll be able to find those charts here as well. Now let's take a look at some of the features that we have for our charts. So up front we have some of our interactive features. So starting off here we have trackball support. So this works by placing your finger on the screen and then sliding across the chart to reveal the different data points. So in this particular chart we're not actually showing the data markers or the data points. So that's an option that you have. You don't always have to show your data markers. They can be hidden until you actually activate the trackball. We also support live update in our chart. So here you can see live update, so essentially real-time data can be shown in these charts. And you can also customize the refresh rate for these charts. As far as our axes are concerned, we also support multiple types of axes. So we have category axes, numerical, logarithmic, and date-time axes. We also support strip lines. These can be set horizontally as well as vertically. We have support for multiple axes. So you can see here we have a column chart with a line chart overlaid on top. We also support data point selection. So here you can see I'm tapping on the different columns on this chart. And I can also tap again to deselect a column. We also support pinch to zoom. So here you can see I have a scatter chart, and using 2 fingers I can zoom in and out, and then using 1 finger I can pan in any direction. We also support vertical chart orientation. So you can see here another example of auto refresh as well, and you may have noticed that the y-axis was scaling appropriately as more data was piling into this chart. Here we have an example of the exposed data markers for the data points. So in addition, this also allows you to tap on those data markers to expose a tooltip. These tooltips support templates, so they can be customized, and they also support animations, both animating in and animating out. Then we also have standard data markers where you have the values of your data points displayed just outside or just to the side of your actual data points. So you can see here we have different values being displayed with different colors and different icons depending on what those values are. So that is showing also conditional styling. This next example, the auto-scrolling example, is another example showing how you can customize the auto refresh rate. So this one is a bit slower than the ones we saw before. This is updating every 500 milliseconds. In addition, it's also showing that we can pause the update by simply putting our finger on the screen. So if I essentially tap on this chart, I can pause the update, and then I can pan backwards and forwards in the data. As soon as I let go, it will continue to auto refresh. The last example here is of our technical indicators that I mentioned earlier. So this is just a collection of what those are. So you can see here we have accumulation distribution, average true, exponential moving average, and so on, all available here on mobile. Next up is our data grid component. So the first example that you're going to see here is titled Getting Started, and this is really just another performance example. So again, just like with the charts with the animation, you'll want to download this app so you can see and experience the smooth scrolling available in our data grid for yourself. The first feature we'll look at is sorting. So this is your standard ascending and descending sort. We do also support tri-state sorting, so you can have a third state there where it will essentially cancel out the ascending and the descending sort. We also support custom sorting. So in this example, the first name column has been sorted by the length of the first name as opposed to simply alphabetically. We also support filtering in a data grid. In this case, it works as you type, so you don't actually have to submit your search query. So you see here I can search on the book ID column. I can search on the second column, the book name. And again, it will sort or search, or rather filter as I type. And then we can also, of course, set it to filter on specific columns. So I can click on this. In this example, we have the settings icon on the top right, which allows me to choose a specific column to filter by. And when I do that, it also allows me to set a condition for how that data is filtered. We also support frozen rows and columns, although here we're only showing frozen rows. We have support for cell templates. In this example, shows just a single cell, so a single column in this data grid. So essentially makes it look very much like a list view. However, we'll take a look at our actual list view control in just a second, and you can see how much more you can do with a dedicated list view as well. But the data grid also supports grouping. So here you can see an example of grouping where we have multiple products grouped by their product type. And while grouped, sorting is still enabled, so you can do multi-sort in addition to tri-state sorting while utilizing a grouping. Custom grouping is also supported, so in this example, we are grouping based on the total amount of sales in 2 quarters. We also have multiple selection modes available in the data grid. So here we can see that we have multi-select enabled, so I can select as many rows as I'd like. I can also deselect, so if I tap on one that's been selected already, it will deselect it. In this example, we do have the ability to change the selection mode, so we can go with single, where you must always have something selected. So one row must always be selected. And then you can also, of course, enable single with deselect, where you can actually cancel out a selection as well. When it comes to editing, we support multiple column types. So we have here our numeric cell type. So you can see here it brings up the numeric keypad on the device. Next up, we have a combo box or a picker. So the second column shows the platform-specific drop-down menu here. So this is the Android drop-down menu. Next up is a date picker for a date field. And you can see once again, platform-specific calendar date picker. And then the last field here is a standard alphanumerical text field. So it brings up the standard keypad on the device. We also allow for the user to customize their view of the grid. So users can resize columns using simple touch gestures. They can also reposition both columns and rows using drag and drop. So here we can grab a column and move it to a different spot and do the same thing with rows. In this example, you can see all the different grid column types that we support. So we have here an image column, we have a checkbox column. You can see that as these checkboxes appear, they do animate onto the screen as well. We have support for unbound columns. In this example, it is the total column at the end, which is being calculated based on the unit price, the quantity, and the discount percentage. Our grids also support conditional styling. So you can see here different values will result in different cell background colors. In addition to conditional styling, we also do support styling the entire grid itself. So in this example, we're actually showing sort of a theming system. So you have a couple of themes to choose from dark green, red, and blue. And so again, if you download this application, you can see the source code and see exactly how this was achieved. So you can offer your users something similar where they can choose their own theme for their view of the grid. The grid also supports auto row height, so if you have uneven rows, that's perfectly fine. So you can see an example here of different row heights being applied automatically. We also support diagonal scrolling, so if you have a large data set, lots of columns, in addition to lots of rows, you can scroll in essentially all directions, so not just up and down, but also diagonally as well. We also have here our load more example. So as you reach the bottom of the grid, you'll see that you are presented with a load more items button, which allows you to manually load more data into the grid. We do also support incremental loading, so we can automatically load data into the grid as a user reaches the bottom or before they do. We also support pull to refresh. So you can see here a simple swipe from the top initiates the pull to refresh action, which will then refresh the data on the screen. We do also support paging. So you can see here we have a page bar at the bottom. It can also be set to appear at the top. It does also support scrolling. So it is a scrollable page bar. So if you have lots of pages to go through, your users can scroll through that and choose the exact one that they want. We also support swipe gestures in the grid. So you can swipe left to right to reveal some additional options. So if I tap on this edit button, then it brings up a nice edit dialog window. And tapping on delete removes that row. We also support rendering of dynamic data inside of the grid, so essentially auto refresh, as you can see here. And then once again, we're showing that off with conditional styling. So different values will show different icons and different text colors. And then lastly, something that we have available on all of our web and desktop controls where it's appropriate, and now also here on mobile, is exporting. So you can see across the top, we have the ability to export the grid to both PDF and Excel formats. So I'm going to tap on the Excel icon here. You'll see that it immediately brings up the Microsoft Office Excel on my device since I already have that pre-installed. Next up is the Syncfusion list view. So again, with the getting started example, very similar to the data grid, more or less a performance example just showing you the smooth scrolling and animation with that control. Moving on, we do support a grid layout inside of our list view. In this example, we are also demonstrating selection. So we can tap on these images and select them to be marked for deletion or sharing or some other action. We also support grouping in the list view. So in this case, we have a contact list that's grouped alphabetically by the first initial. And then we also support a horizontal orientation for the list view. So in this case, we're essentially showing two different list views in one page. So we have this list view here, scrolling horizontally. So it's the second one at the bottom of the page. We also have multiple selection modes, just like we did with the grid. So in this example, we're showing checkbox selection. So just tap and hold to enable selection mode, and then you can do, or then you can select as many items in the list view as you need. Again, just like the grid, we also support sorting and filtering. So just like on the grid, when you decide to filter through the list view, it will filter as you type. So if I type in the word swiping, you can see that it automatically comes up without me having to finish what I type, or the word drag from drag and drop. Or I can also search these tags, so I can search for the word testing, for example. Oh, yeah, there we go. And then it'll search through those different tags. We also support sorting on the list view, so you can see that here with this icon in the top right. So you tap it once to do ascending, tap it again to do descending, and then in this case, tri-state sorting is enabled, so a third tap will disable the sort altogether. Again, like in the grid, we support swipe gesture, so swiping left to right will reveal different icons that you can attach actions to. The list view also supports pull to refresh, and this implementation is a little bit different since it's a bit more full-featured because it's actually an implementation of our separate pull to refresh control, which we'll also look at in just a minute. So here, if I pull to refresh, you'll see that there's a more substantial animation that shows that something's happening and indicates that the pull to refresh action has been activated. And then lastly here we have the ability to also display uneven rows inside of the list view, which we call auto-fitting items. So when you enable auto-fit, you can see here uneven rows are properly displayed and they're properly sized inside of the list view as well. The next control on the list is our PDF viewer. So like before, this is something that we offer across our control suite. So this is also available on web and desktop and now on mobile. So here on Xamarin, our PDF viewer is able to search through the text. So if you have a document loaded, you can type in the search term, and you'll see that it will highlight all the results. You'll get your left and right arrows so you can tab through the various results. And you can also pinch to zoom into the document itself. Additionally, you have the ability to specify a collection or a list of different documents that can be viewed inside of the PDF viewer. And of course, you can skip to specific pages by tapping on the page index at the top. So that function, or that control rather, works very well in conjunction with our ability to export to PDF. So we saw that with the data grid, so you can imagine exporting the PDF inside the data grid and keeping your users inside of your application using the PDF viewer, unlike my example earlier where I tapped on Excel and it brought me to a different application, Microsoft's Excel. Next up is our autocomplete component. So this can be used anywhere where you have an input field. It supports a standard suggest mode where you simply type something in and you get a list of suggestions based on your input. It does support multiple suggestion modes, including suggest and append, where as you type, it will finish your entry based on the nearest suggestion. Next up is our numeric text box, and this is kind of an advanced entry field. So this makes it easy for you to apply different notations to your numerical fields. So you can do currency, you can do numerical, you can do percentage. You can also very easily apply cultures. In this example, we're actually showing that as well. So you can see here we can change the culture of our numbers very easily, which will change the appearance and notation of each one. Next up is our calendar component. This is part of our scheduler as well, so some of these features will kind of overlap there. So with our calendar component, you have the ability to see inline events. So any day with an event, one or more events associated to it will have this dash or some sort of indicator to let you know that there is an event for that day. And if you tap on it, you'll get this nice slide down inline view of the events for that day. It also supports blackout dates, so you can set up days or times of the day that cannot be used, cannot be scheduled. So I can't even select those days. So as you can see here, I'm tapping through the 27th, 28th, 29th. If I try to tap on the 22nd, nothing happens. This control also supports localization. So you can see here we have a Chinese translation of the UI. In this example, we can change that. So we can go to Spanish. We can go to different translations that have been provided here. Next up is the navigation drawer component. So this is very similar to the master detail view that you get with Xamarin Forms. However, this provides more options for how to actually set this up. So you have your standard hamburger button, which will trigger the slide out menu to appear. You also have the ability to slide from the left side of the screen. But in addition to that, you can actually set the slide out menu to appear from all four sides of the screen. So you can set it up not just left and right, but also top to bottom. You can also customize the transition type, so the animation used to actually reveal that menu. So I'm going to set it to push and to the right. And now if I slide my finger from the right, you'll see that it pushes the content over instead of just overlaying on top. Next up, we have a number of different gauge controls. So we have a circular gauge here, which allows you to set multiple ranges, scales, pointers, as well as headers, so you can very easily customize the look and feel of this gauge. And of course, you can use this to display multiple different types of values, numerical values in different increments, depending on how you need to use that. We also have a linear gauge version of it, which supports essentially the same features. Obviously, the main difference is how this is displayed and how it's laid out. And then we also have a digital gauge, which supports, as you can see here, auto refresh. So there are multiple segments that can be chosen for displaying data. And in addition to the numerical data, it does also support text and special characters. Next on the list is the Range Navigator. This is another control that we have across all of our platforms, web, desktop, mobile, and also in our enterprise platform, the dashboard platform. So this is primarily used to filter chart data. So you can see here, we can set a start and an end point to set our date range. And then if we want, we can slide that date range around so we can actually move through our data more easily. In addition, because this is primarily used to filter either date or numerical data, we can snap to specific units. So in this case, we're looking at dates per month on a monthly basis. So we have different months laid out here. If I tap on a month, it will snap to it, automatically set itself to the start and end point of that particular month. Next up is our scheduling component. So like I said before, this is the other part of our calendar component. This is obviously the one that allows you to create events. So you have the ability to, of course, customize the fields that are associated with each event. So you can add additional fields such as details or notes. But you also get the ability to, or you also get your date pickers for setting up your date ranges for these events. So you have your standard date picker, and then you also have a radial time picker that you can use as well. So you can choose your hour, your minutes, and then of course your meridian, AM or PM. Just like the calendar, you also have the ability to view inline events. And in this case, because we're looking at a scheduler, we have a different icon. We have a dot instead of a dash, and this indicates recurring events. So if you have created a recurring event in the calendar, you're able to denote those separately from the standard one-time events. The localization support also extends to the events themselves. So we saw that previously with the UI, but also events can also be localized. And I mentioned this before, you can customize your blackout dates and you can also do them as times of the day. So here you can see an example of a specific hour within the day that cannot be used for creating a new event. And then lastly, we saw a little bit of this before in the calendar. You can color code your events to categorize them. And when you do so, you can also apply templates to those events. So you can see here we have applied a nice icon to this birthday event. and then another icon for this medical checkup. Next up is the Kanban control for mobile. So that's another one of these controls that we have available on all of our platforms, web and desktop and mobile. And it works the same across all three. So this is a drag and drop editor. So you have the ability to tap on a card, and then you can drag it around the various statuses that you create inside of the Kanban control. You have the ability to set up restrictions. So if, for example, I take a task that's in the to-do status and then try to move it all the way to the final status by skipping over the others, I'm not allowed to do that. So you can see here it grays out and gives me a red circle with a dash through it, showing me that I cannot do that. In addition, we do also support swim lanes. So if you have, in this example, we customized it to be an ordering system. So if you grab an item, move it over to the next status, you'll see that we have two different swim lanes that we can choose here, dine in or take out. And so if you just kind of finalize that process in your head, you can take it to its logical conclusion to completing an order. Next up, the next two controls that we'll be looking at, the picker and the image editor, as you can see here, are both labeled as preview controls. Now this first one, the picker control, is labeled as preview and is not currently available as part of our suite. It should be available in the very next release, which should be happening in the next few weeks. But this is just an actual preview of what's coming there. So this is an improved picker. So you can see here as we make selections in this picker, the background color changes, so we have some more control over how to customize this picker. It can be used as part of different dialog windows now, so we can now use it as a date picker. So you have the scrollable month and day and year selector here. Can also be used for not just dates but also time. So again, your hour, your minute, and your meridian. And it can also be used to create a cascading drop-down menu effect. So here we have the ability to choose, for example, a specific country and then cities within that country. So we can have all kinds of different cascading menus using this control. It can also be used to set date and times in a single view as opposed to separately set your date and then separately set your time. So you can see here a combined date and time picker. The next preview or control that's in preview is the image editor. So as you can see here, this one allows you to take an image from the device's gallery or to take a new one by accessing the device's camera. So I'll just stick to one of the sample pictures. And what the image editor actually allows you to do is to annotate images, so you can add text layers. You can add multiple text layers actually, so add a second one, change the color, change the position, and then I'll add a third even, and do the same thing, change the color, and change the position. You can also essentially doodle on top of the images, so you have the ability to change the stroke width as well as the color, just like we could with the text. You also have the ability to apply frames or shapes on top of the image, and you can resize those. You can also fill them if you'd like. And of course, you can change the stroke color. And then lastly, you have some basic transformation controls. So you have the ability to crop an image. You can also flip an image, so you can rotate. And then you can also flip an image on its vertical axis. Next on the list is our pull to refresh control. So we briefly saw this already on the list view. So this is, as I mentioned, a separately available control that can be utilized on any application or any page or any view where it makes sense. So the features of this pull to refresh control include the ability to pause the pull to refresh action. So if you scroll down from the top and keep your finger on the screen, then the pull to refresh action will not actually activate. And if you continue to hold your finger on the screen and change your mind, you can just slide it back up and cancel the action altogether. So we already saw this before where you are able to simply do a simple swipe from the top to actually activate the pull to refresh. Some of the other options you have here are the ability to change the animation used for revealing that pull to refresh activity indicator. So just like before with the navigation door, you can choose either to slide it on top or to actually push the content of the page down when that activity indicator appears. The next two controls are also labeled as preview, but unlike the first one, both of these are also currently available, so you can use these as is while they're still in preview. So this first one is essentially a context menu, so you can see here it is a floating icon. When you tap on it, it reveals the different menu items. In this case, we're showing a couple of different system controls. On the far right there, we have a little sun icon, so that'll be brightness. So if I tap on that, it brings us to another layer of the menu, which gives us some presets. So we have a low, medium, and high option for the brightness. But in addition, we can also just rotate around and set our own values using this control. So it's fairly simple to customize the radial menu here. So you can see we're using it as a color picker. So using the ability to nest those menus, we can choose a main color and then choose its hue in the second menu. We can also choose to display the radial menu as just a specific segment. So here we can see we have just a single segment of the radial menu down in the corner of this page, which gives us just a few options. Next up is the Sunburst Chart. So this chart, also labeled in preview, is currently available for use. It's a nice way to display hierarchical data. So the inner circle displays the root level of your data, with all the other circles displaying different levels in that hierarchy. Next up is our map component. So this is a GeoJSON shapefile viewer. So it supports pinch to zoom, so you can easily zoom into different areas within the map. It supports bubble visualization, as you're seeing here. So differently sized bubbles indicate different values depending on their size. It also supports color mapping, so different shapes within a shapefile can be color-coded to display different values. So you can see here, in addition to that, we also support tap events. So if you tap on a shape or select a shape, you can handle those events and do something with it. Here we're just displaying a simple tooltip. We also support data markers, and here we're using geolocation tags. So you'll notice that these markers are not necessarily centered inside of a specific shape, so these are not the same things as labels. So if I zoom in on this one in the United States, for example, you'll see that its relative position stays as the more I zoom in. And then lastly, because this is a GeoJSON shapefile viewer, you can display any type of content. So here, in this last example, we're using this control as a ticketing system. So this is the interior of a bus. I can tap on a specific shape to select it, and you can see that I've essentially selected my seats on this vehicle. Next up is our tree map control. So similar to the Sunburst chart, this is used for displaying both hierarchical and flat data collections. So you can see some examples out here, and it can also be customized to include different icons and labels as well. Next up is our barcode generator. So this allows you to generate barcodes and QR codes in multiple formats. So these, we support various different types of barcodes and QR codes, each one with support for different character sets. We also have a sparkline control, which allows you to embed these sparklines in a grid. And then next up is our range slider. So you have the ability to set start and end points in the range slider. You have the ability to customize whether it snaps the tick marks or not, and we have those examples here in this sample. You have the ability to choose whether or not, or the positioning of the tick marks. You can choose whether or not it snaps to those tick marks. You can also choose the label placement. So you have various different properties you can set there to customize how this range slider looks. It also does not have to be a multiple point slider. It can also be a single point slider, as you can see here, and it can be set in a vertical orientation. The next control on the list is our busy indicator. So this is actually a collection of different animations that you can use freely in your application, and they're essentially just generic loading animations. So these are different activity indicators that you can just use if you need something more interesting than what comes with your platform of choice. The next control is our rating slider. So this is a this is a slider that is based off of these images. So you can see here we have a star slider, which allows you to either tap on a specific rating or just slide your finger to fill them up. You have the ability to change the precision of your of the slider, so we can go from standard, which will completely fill an icon or a star when you slide or tap on it, or you can go to exact, where you can do a partial fill. You also have the ability to customize those icons. So in this case, we have the different smiley faces that indicate level of enjoyment, and you can either slide your finger on them to select, or you can just tap on a specific rating. The next two controls are dedicated to displaying images. So we have two different image sliders. We have the carousel here, which by default provides a cover flow-like animation. It can also be set to simply display items linearly, so you have a more simplistic animation where it just scrolls left to right. And then we also have our rotator control, which is useful for displaying multiple images in a specific section of a page. So like what we have here with this product slider on this product page. So we can choose whether or not this is an auto-playing slideshow, which is what it is doing right now. We can also choose the direction in which those images slide. So right now they're horizontal, so we can change that to vertical. And you can see they slide vertically. Next up, we have our numeric up-down buttons. So these allow you to set min and max values for your numerical inputs. And of course, you can also specify the increment in which these numbers are changed each time the buttons are tapped. Our data source control is not a visual control. However, we are using it here with the list view. So it does support, or handles rather, the sorting, grouping, and filtering operations used in the list view in the grid. Next up is the calculate example. And so although this is actually an example showing a calculator, this is not actually what the control itself is. So what this is a collection of formulas and functions that you normally find in Microsoft Excel. In fact, this is actually the same library of formulas that you would find in our spreadsheet control on the web and desktop, which is our Excel file editor and viewer, which gives you access to about 75 to 80% of the formulas you find in Microsoft Excel. And they're also all available here on Xamarin, so you can use these in any way that you might need, whether it be inside of a grid or some other application where you might need to run some of those formulas. And then lastly, the last four controls that we have listed here are our file format library for Xamarin. So we have XLSIO for generating Excel files, DocIO for generating Word documents, Presentation for generating PowerPoint files, and then of course PDF at the bottom for generating PDF files. So all four of these examples in the sample browser will simply give you examples of the types of objects you can include in the exported files. So for example, with XLSIO, you can include charts and formulas in your Excel files. With Word doc, or with documents, you can also include charts, but you can also do things like mail merge and choose to use built-in or custom styles. With PowerPoint, we have examples showing how you can have multiple slides in a PowerPoint. You can also add other objects into those slides like charts and tables and images. And then lastly, with PDF, you can do similar things, how to add tables, charts, barcodes, and other types of objects inside of those documents, and how to export them. All right, and that covers our demonstration on our Xamarin controls. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly hand over the reins to Marissa so she can go over our licensing options, and then we'll talk about then we'll go into our Q&A session.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. Before we move on to the questions, let me go ahead and mention our Community License Edition. For smaller companies with revenue under $1 million US, all Syncfusion products are available for free. That includes all of our controls in the Essential Studio as well as our enterprise solutions. We have plenty of customers who have built up their businesses starting with our community license. For those of you who don't qualify for the community license, let me introduce you to our global flat license. We offer 4 tiers of pricing tied to the size of your organization, starting at $3,995 US. Our global flat license eliminates compliance and licensing headaches by making sure everyone who needs a license has one, including third parties and contractors. As your team grows, you can focus on your projects instead of worrying about headcount. There are no surprise fees with a global license. If you'd like more information, please visit us at syncfusion.com.